You do have a study guide. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to chapter 16.
Yep.
Called by circumstance. And we've missed it. And our companion, our only male companion on this journey, is on his way to Canada.
Oh, that's right.
So we'll miss her.
Yeah.
But
Good
I feel-
morning, traveler.
Hey, Kate, good to see you.
Hey.
Good to see you. Y'all have a good class. I just want to say hey.
Okay.
I think he's excited to be
I
back.
think yes. So I'm sure that we're going to have a lively conversation that he can look at upon his return. So we won't want to let him down.
Okay.
We want to have a good, meaty conversation if we can about Esther
Okay.
and about the last book. Then just a little aside about next week. We are meeting again next week at 10 for kind of a evaluation, only if you have good things to say. But no, we're going to have an evaluation. And I would like you to think over this next week, what has been the most powerful for you, what maybe both in remembering the different characters from the Old Testament, which one of those really did you identify with, which one of those chapters called by whatever spoke to you, what maybe what it's gotten you thinking about, right? Like, what are you thinking about differently, or what are you remembering, or what are you recalling, or what's troubling you? Where God might be working in your call. So that's where we'll go next week. And I hope everybody will weigh in on that and have something to say. All right, everybody good this morning? We'll just check in. Laura Flaherty, good?
Good, yep. Everything's
All right.
well.
Okay, good. Kate, now that we've got your camera issues resolved.
You're on mute. I'm okay. My leg has been kind of bummy, but I think it's because of all the different weather. We're not going to get the hurricane, but or the whatever you call it right now, but the pressure keeps going up and down as it goes by, and I think that's. And Maisie, you should have been with me yesterday because I did plein air painting yesterday.
Oh,
It was absolutely terrible. I was so embarrassed.
It's
I
not
had all this-
easy.
Easy. I had paint on me from head to toe. It was like,
Well, I do that on a regular basis.
but I thought about you thinking, I wish Maisie was here with me, but I'm glad to see you there.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, maybe when you're back here sometime, we'll go plein air painting. I would love to. It's not easy.
I would love to too. It's not easy. No.
I've never been
especially
happy
with-
with anything I did out in the, I've been
As
happy
well-
being out there, but not with what I painted.
No, thanks. Well, Maisie, since you're going, how are you?
Since
You were talking, so I'm just gonna let you keep talking. Are you doing all right?
yes, I'm feel like I'm back to my full self.
well, you look good. So
Thank
you.
I was gonna say you look terrific.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm great because Rob's back and I'm great. So there we go.
I'm great. I really took advantage of like heading to the bed and being sick for a week and stayed an extra week. And
You needed to.
Absolutely.
yeah,
Well,
I
she
can't
had
even
fever.
believe that you did that.
Well,
I
she
can't
had
believe
fever.
you did that.
it was really amazing. It was, I mean, I came back yesterday feeling like $1,000,000, really rested. And anyway, so
Yay.
it's all good. And I first tested negative, I guess at this point, 6 days ago, and then again 2 days ago. So, I feel safe, but if anybody doesn't feel safe, if you got sick and couldn't get surgery,
Yeah, I
I'd
would not
shoot
be happy.
myself.
Not your fault if she gets sick. That's true.
Oh, Ginger.
Maybe.
So
But
Laura, good to see
I'm-
you.
Good to be seen. I'm excited about my surgery on Monday. So once that happens
You're having this surgery at Pardee.
at Pardee, which is a good hospital,
It's a good
And will you
hospital.
be in the hospital for,
a couple of nights. they said.
okay.
Yeah. So, it's gonna fix what's wrong, so that's.
And
the
they
good
really
thing.
feel like it.
They really.
You're
Yes.
doing your surgery.
His name is John Hicks. He's with Ortho, Emerge Ortho.
Mhm.
I'm good.
Good.
I'm
Yeah,
so
and you,
glad
Ginger?
you're getting that done.
Counting
Yeah,
it all joy.
I'm good too. I'm healing and just doing great.
This is a recuperative table.
That's
Yeah.
right. everybody.
I feel, I hate being on the outside. I try not to injure myself.
At,
so
at
that I can
any
join
given
them.
time, look at the ages of us. They're gonna be some of
Better
us.
one.
I got a little bit. I got a couple
Yeah.
of years. Okay. All right. Well, it is good to see everybody. And again, we're going to start by reading a little bit of the text, which is which it goes on to, which is I think, just the first page here of our stuff. But this is Esther 4:1 through 5:2. And if you don't have that pulled up or you can't get to the website where I hope she posted it,
Does anybody?
there's more.
I made a copy.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just, well, Kate, then would you like to read the first paragraph then?
Not particularly, but I will.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mordecai.
When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on a sackcloth and ashes and went through the city, wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and most of them lay in sackcloth and ashes.
Sharon. Swallow.
When Esther's maids and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what was happening and why. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther, explaining it to her, and charge her to go to the king to make supplication to him and entreat him for her people.
Laura.
Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come to the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him.
Maisie, can you read the last paragraph?
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, opposite the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne inside the palace, opposite the entrance to the palace. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor, and he held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter.
How many of you were familiar with her story or, at some level?
Yeah,
I was
Me.
I remember reading it before.
Yeah.
with some other
it's
parts
weird.
of her story, I was more familiar.
Yes. So if we go back a little bit, she was the prettiest woman, and she caught the king's eye, and he'd gotten rid of his queen Vesti, Robert. He had
Mhm.
tossed her aside, and he was looking. He became so she became the new queen.
Didn't it say she was the prettiest of 1,000?
Yeah, something like that. And I don't know how many queens Mordecai had at the time. But any case, this was, and the outcome is that she enters the inner chamber. The king does extend the scepter. She goes in and she makes a case for the Jews, exposes Haman for who he was. And he ends up the gallows that he built for Mordecai, right? Haman gets hung on those gallows. And then anyone that had supported that. So why was this such a big deal? Was because this wasn't Israel. This wasn't happening in Israel. This was happening in Babylon, right? In Persia. This is happening in Persia. And since that time, Jews celebrate the feast called Purim, right? And this is to remember her bravery and the role that one person can play in helping another. So a lot of the feast is around the giving of food, right? The baskets of food that you give to
Yes.
another, and then dressing up in
shelter.
costume. Yes. I wrote that down on page something here.
I'm gonna show my ignorance, but why did Esther stand up for the Jews? Was she Jewish?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
she was
Yes.
Jewish.
But
And no, but not everybody knew.
Mordecai said, "Don't tell
Don't
anybody."
tell anybody.
Yeah.
But Mordecai had said to her, and you may have been called for this.
Mm.
That's a line we've heard many times, isn't it?
Yeah.
For
Mhm.
this might be the very reason for which you're called. Now, sometimes we might call that grandiose something.
Yeah, but that's why you're here.
Mhm.
Making things fit.
That's the circumstance for this.
And
you might-
now, I'm sorry, now in a lot of Reform Passover Seders, they have also added a cup for her to go
Interesting.
along with Elijah's cup.
Well, and I think that
Because I thought it was awesome when I thought about when he said, if it hadn't been for Esther, none of
Yes.
us would be here.
I thought that was awesome too. And I think that's his point. Like, one never knows.
Right.
If the Jews if that section of the diaspora had been, sacrificed
Eliminated.
for
Yeah.
Haman's cause, maybe not. Maybe there would be no remnant returning. Maybe there would be. I mean, there have been Jews in Persia since this time, right? And that's something people forget frequently when we think about the Arab world and whatever. But
Are they
Yeah.
Asher something, some word,
Asheram.
Asherati or something?
No.
Those are not.
no,
those are-
Ashkenazi,
that's
no.
No.
Those are generally European Jews.
European, okay.
Greek and European Jews. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ashkenazi. It's just, and then a lot of I think, and I know Ruth, Kate will correct me in this, but I know that frequently a lot of those Jews had become quite ultra Orthodox, right? Some of the Ashkenazi Jews have become, in
Yes.
order to maintain
Yeah.
their
Purity.
purity
Yeah,
and to keep
yeah.
that going, and lots of the ones that
Because
you
of that
find in
ancient
Brooklyn
heritage they
and
wanted.
so forth. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's a very limited knowledge on my part. So how often do we ask the question, is this the call of God?
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Not as often as I should, but I'm asking it about, this is.
Making you think about it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I've been asking it lately.
Uh-huh.
I think of the political climate we have now and that sometimes people say something is the call of God because it's what they want to happen.
Mhm,
And it,
Not
you know.
necessary,
or
not at all.
I would, in my opinion, not at all,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like,
Right.
I just read that evangelical
The book about
and,
Jesus and
Jesus, John Wayne and
Yeah.
how the, how,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus and John Wayne,
Laura-
what did
Yeah, I
Yes.
agree with you that lots of times that call can be misused,
Yes.
Well, it's not,
unfortunately.
well, it's not.
But I think this whole book is about that question, and that's something, everybody seems to ask themselves all the time. Is this really the call of God?
Mm-hmm.
Back to Samuel and Eli and.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I wonder, I've made lots of charts or spreadsheets in my life with like, you guys have done it. Okay, should I buy this car or this car? Pros, cons,
Are you
desires,
kidding?
right? I mean, you don't do that?
I couldn't do that in my life.
I couldn't
Isn't
do
that
it either.
That's probably why you're married.
Instant gratification,
But you know what I
I can't
mean.
even organize my bedroom.
I've seen your paint buckets.
My studio tells it all.
It does. But you know what I mean. And I mean, even if you don't do it physically, write it down. We think that way.
Mhm.
If I do this, then what's the outcome likely to be, or what, good,
chart.
good,
Mhm.
bad, indifferent. I don't know that often when I go to buy a car, do I say, is this the call of God? Or, I mean,
unless you really want that car.
I mean, if I
Yeah.
buy store brand
I heard him
mayonnaise,
tell me that.
store brand mayonnaise or, Dukes.
Yeah.
I don't go through that. But truthfully, I mean, that's being silly, I guess, in some ways, but what is it that rises to the level of, is this a call of God? Where did we draw the line? We could say, well, it's not mayonnaise.
Well, so
know.
often it's in retrospect, you say, that was a God thing.
Mhm.
We make a decision and we're making it by the seat of our pants, but then it either works out well or it doesn't work out at all. And we say, God was orchestrating that.
Certainly Esther didn't marry the king knowing that she was going to be responsible for saving
Saving the
all the
Jews.
Jews in
Yeah.
Persia.
No, she had no idea about that.
Right. And so I think that part is also a great takeaway from this chapter, that we don't know when we're in a circumstance, what might unfold.
And not dissimilar to, that the author talks about, Mary,
Yeah.
the same
Yes.
thing.
Mhm.
This is what you're gonna do.
Or
that
Joseph.
was a pretty,
That's-
that was a pretty interesting parallel, wasn't it?
I-
You're reading about Esther, and then all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, there was another little Jewish girl that had to make a big decision. Yeah.
That's right.
who was responsible for saving the whole world, not just the Jews.
Yeah.
She wasn't, but
No, but I think there's that thing. And then we do have those kind of what if conversations. I think God would have chosen someone else. That's kind of how I see the world. That may not be true. At lectionary on Tuesday, Collins asked, because the gospel is, see this beauty. Someone says, oh, this temple is so beautiful. And Jesus says to them, look, not one of these stones is going to remain. Everything's going to get turned upside down. And you all are going to face all this calamity. And Collins's question to the group, which I thought was just lovely and really un-Collins-like in some ways,
If you will.
if you will, said, what would you do if you had been among that? If Jesus said to you, I'm standing outside of Heinz Hall and I say, this is such a gorgeous building. And Jesus says to me, it's not going to stand. Nothing here is going to remain the same. What would my response be? The disciples' response is, give us a sign so we know when it's going to happen. Maybe that means so we can be out of
so
town.
we can
Yeah.
brace ourselves
or
or
we can,
change it.
yes, whatever it is. And I said, well, one answer would be, are you sure? Can't we do something to change?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's another answer.
Tell us what to do and we'll do it.
And we'll do it, because that's my response to everything. When someone says this is this
Fix it.
way, I say, well, there's got to be another answer. We got to fix it. And then my second answer is there a sale going on? Because I'd like to be distracted from from this outcome. So,
Well,
that-
and what do you, do you think it was, I sort of thought of it, yes, the physical building, I suppose, but like if it was Heinz Hall, for example, I would think more of it being the people inside, but that the daily life would be, is all gonna be upside down. The building
Yeah.
is a building. The
yes,
people
what it
in it.
what it represents, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. But is there a way to change that? So, there's that, I guess I'm giving that as a comparison.
Mhm.
There's, when Jesus says these things, isn't there one person that's going to stand up besides Jesus who can make the difference here? Where's our Esther? Where's our Mary?
Mhm.
Where's our,
Mhm.
who's that person that can do that? And the answer is, I think, that we know post resurrection is that it's all of us.
Mhm.
That's the
Mhm.
difference now. We all have
Mm.
that capacity to make that change. So, but we got a ways to go. We had like, she was like in the 5th century. We've got some time to cover between there and then. So Esther was called by circumstance. Again, I give you at the top of page 2, kind of what the backstory is. So if you want to read that. And the queen basically used an elaborate scheme to convince the king that the vizier was up to no good. The way that the story ends is, instead of Jews being on the receiving end of the violence, Haman was hanged and his sons hanged for the evil plot.
Because she married up.
Because she married up. Yes, she did. She did.
Yes, she did.
So
Sorry.
Esther had to risk her own life to save the lives of others. And she found herself in a circumstance beyond her control. She neither created it, but she did have some impact on it. I mean, Haman was acting unbeknownst to her. She didn't even know why Mordecai had rent his clothing, why he had put on the sackcloth. She didn't, she was just trying to fix his immediate need, which she saw as, why is my uncle out there running around in a sackcloth, embarrassing all of us in his attire? So she was just trying to fix what she saw. And I wonder how often we do that. We see the manifestation of something and we try to fix a need that we see, and we may not know what's underneath the need. We don't know yet, but yeah, that's the part I was thinking about too. How often that happens where I see something and want to fix that, which is honorable and just. You see someone walking around with no clothing on, of course you would get clothing, but we may not know the backstory as to why there is no clothing, what kind of persecution is happening in the background
And
that would be causing that.
the thing is that so often when we see something and we deem it a crisis and want to fix it, so often when we get some distance between it, later look back on it and say, thank God I couldn't fix it with my attempts, because the way he fixed it was something I would never have thought of,
Yeah,
or had the power to do.
right.
And so,
I mean, a lot of this, we don't know until it's all over. And, I mean, when it says, maybe you're here for this very reason. You can't know that. You can't know that until it's over, and either maybe it was or it wasn't, which is kind of a scary process, but a prospect, but you have to trust.
Right.
And so you keep your Dory analogy on Tuesday.
Yes.
Keep swimming. Keep swimming. It's the thing that I've noticed is that God has provided. For me, life is like traveling on the interstate, and there I am trying to keep up with traffic, and am I even going the right direction? Well, He provides exit ramps like every 8 miles. That's a good thing. And usually has me pull over by letting me know I have to use the bathroom, but we sometimes don't know
metaphor.
until it's over, but we need to step out in faith. We need to keep swimming. We need to,
Right.
you know, if we,
Trusting, it's a trust thing that.
It
that
is.
This path that we're on,
right.
this road, this highway, this interstate is one
But
for
we
which
have-
we have God's, I mean, and I don't know what that looks like. And sometimes it seems odd and different and weird and unpredictable and even unnecessary maybe, right?
In order to trust in that kind of way, though, we have to have been walking with him and seen him step in so many times, and in our humanness and our stubbornness and our blindness, we finally learn to see through that and say, he's always come through. I can trust this. I can trust him. But we have to have grown in that to be able to do that.
And where we didn't come through,
Was
we 99% of the time,
probably a
at
very
least I
good
can
thing.
say this for me, I wasn't really listening. I launched off on my own highway somewhere. And
Start building a new road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's take
and-
that analogy.
always started second guessing and turned around and went.
Went back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we got, besides the exit ramps, we have U-turns too.
Yeah.
And sometimes those are right, you
Sometimes
know.
they're good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other part in this chapter that I found so fascinating is the author reminds us that the word God is never used. That in
In the book.
Esther, in the
Mm.
book of Esther, but it's implied, isn't it? It runs in and through, and how often could we have say that about our own book of life, our own,
Uh-huh.
the own way. It's not that we have to, I don't know. I was thinking about what you said, Laura, like people who make the claim that this is God's call. And sometimes we can do things without using the word God.
Mhm, mhm.
Not that we don't have to, not that I love to hear people talk about Jesus, that's fine. But I think about the work of the barn. Let's just use that example. And it doesn't ever, I mean, we do list our ministries now and all of that, but it doesn't say a work of God
Mhm.
on the thing, but it is
But
clearly
those of us,
a work
yeah.
of God. And those who work there know that.
Those
It's-
who are in
and-
town, if they come and buy them, they know that's the
They know.
work of God.
I think so.
Mhm.
I think so. And there's probably lots of other examples. But I thought that was interesting that even Esther needed to be reminded, though, of what one person can do. She was willing to risk everything, her life. I mean, she understood how the court worked.
Mhm.
And that king sounds like a real jerk. You can't come in unless I
Yeah.
invite you. And
And if
You
I
have to
don't
look good.
invite you, you
yeah, you have to look
You
good.
gotta look good.
There's a thing about outward appearances here.
Yeah.
That's very, very telling.
Mm.
Very, very telling.
And it had been 30 days since she had been called.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
She may have been out of favor.
Mhm. She hadn't washed her hair and fixed up lately.
Right. Then, so the second part is that Mordecai asked Esther a question which helped her see the meaning behind the circumstance. He asked her, maybe you are here for this very reason, which we talked about briefly.
Mhm.
And what is the value of a well-placed question to illuminate a circumstance and our response to it?
Mhm.
Don't you think that there have been times in all of our lives that you can think to yourself, maybe this is why I am here
Mm,
right now?
mhm, mhm.
I think all of you may have had the experience, and someone just said it to me recently, why not you?
Yeah.
When you say, I can't handle this, or I can't do that, or I don't, this is too
Yes.
much. And then somebody says to you in one way or another, why not you? And I do think that we've all had that. Why not you?
It's a scary question.
Right.
When I ask that. Because
Right.
I've already put up the defenses of why not me.
Right. Right.
Well, and I know you've said a lot of times, Allison, about when you have that call to go to the priesthood, that you were said you had the questioning many times back and forth yourself.
Oh,
And I thought
absolutely.
about you, thought
Yeah.
about you in that, probably the strongest that I can remember anyone sharing was that.
Oh, thank you. But I think, yes, it was. And then my, you know, my excuses were like, I got these 2 children to raise. I have this thing. My husband needs to do this. We have this, we have this, we have these things. And plus I'm not smart enough, or I'm
Just
not,
doesn't make a bit of
you
sense.
know,
for
or it
me.
doesn't just,
I don't-
you know, everybody's gonna laugh, or you know, I've got too many sins, or, you know, whatever it was. I mean, it was years of that. But actually, it was a spiritual director who said to me something very similar, not in the same way, but said to me, "Why not you? Like, what is it about you that you think no one else has? What do you think that anybody else is that finds themselves on this path?" And it's a very narrow path, and it's a very particular path. But I could say the same was true for anybody choosing to be married,
Mhm,
choosing to be a parent,
mhm.
choosing to lead an organization or a board,
Take
any
a
of
new
those.
job,
An-
yeah.
yes, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, those and then a healthy person. Okay, so I don't know why I always think of the unhealthy people, but a healthy person would have some doubts. A healthy person would say, as Mary did, I don't know, I'm young. I'm not married.
Or as Moses did, I can't speak.
Or I
And
can't,
there are
right?
million ways that we do.
I'm just a boy.
Yeah.
We've listened to several of these. And so sometimes if we're paying attention, we do recognize where we might be not, like, think of what we think is suitable to answer a call.
And
But God sees it differently, doesn't? I mean, what do we know about the gospel? We know about the least, the sick, the prisoner, the widow, the woman, the Samaritan, the son who runs away from home, the lost coin, the lost sheep. I mean, we think about all the ways that God says to us something's important about those that I'm not finding in the smartest, the ablest,
And that was
right?
what I was going to say, that most of the time we aren't equipped to do what we're called to do at the time.
And
That's
why
where
would
the
that-
faith comes
That's
in.
right. Why would that be?
And
Right?
yet we are
Yes.
being called,
That's
and
it, yeah.
and he has to prepare us once we say okay and make us ready. And sometimes that's a long, hard process because we go in kicking and screaming.
Also in the gospel this week, it says, don't worry about what you're going to say.
Mhm.
I will give you the wisdom
words,
and the
yeah.
words. And I have found that when I can be outside of myself, and maybe this is a little bit of ego, but I have found saying, well, there's an endowment meeting yesterday, and I found myself able to say things that I would not have imagined I could say. Not, they weren't hard, they weren't mean, they weren't anything. It's just, right, I believed the prayer I spoke at the beginning, and then God gave me the words to help the committee see
Understand,
this maybe in a way that only a priest could see it. Someone who's supposed to be living the life, right? So
What
the
meeting was it?
endowment committee,
Oh, okay.
yes,
I can hear you.
you know, who thinks we don't have enough money. You know how that is,
Yeah.
which I appreciate their stewardship, but we do have enough money. All right. Anyway, and then as with all calls, Esther had to make a choice. I hope if we see anything through this book is that at any place along the route, I'm trying to think of if there was any of the people that we've read about where they didn't have a choice. They all had a choice.
Mary maybe didn't.
But God knew how, no,
yeah.
God knew the way to their heart, right?
Mhm.
In how God approached them.
Mhm.
You know, taking Isaiah into the kingdom and showing Isaiah the glory and making his call that way. He knew Isaiah was not going to be able to say no,
Mhm.
that he knew to what he was called, right? I think that's the same with so many of these calls, that God reaches those whom he's calling in their particular way of seeing the call.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what about Mary? I don't know. Maybe Mary wasn't, there's a lot of speculation on this, right? Maybe
maybe she
Mary
just-
wasn't the first one.
Look,
Maybe it was Susie.
I've talked to 800 girls.
I don't know whether, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's like the homecoming queen died and now you're getting it. I'm not sure if that is the same week, but I mean, I don't know, maybe we say that in the fullness of time, right, God called a woman to do this work, but maybe there was another fullness of time in the year 300. I don't know. I
Mm.
have no idea.
I think for me, it's been such a fortunate ride. It's been getting in the car and heading to that highway and setting the GPS. And I'll be darned, when the GPS is in charge, I don't get lost.
Except for the time we ended up in
Stop
a-
now, don't tell those. Then my,
in a-
then my
at
analogy
11
doesn't work.
o'clock at night in an apple
Oh,
orchard.
yeah. No, you can't. Yeah, that was weird.
And we went by the
No, but
GPS.
seriously, but
Well,
there,
as you don't eat the apple.
but then there's that one time, when you think, no, I got this, and this feels better, and I totally ignored the GPS, and it was a total disaster. But the more I see that, and I've seen that work in my life, and I do have an example I want to give when we get to the end with the Who's Your
Yes.
Mordecai. But,
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, who is your Mordecai? That's a
Well,
great question, y'all. Who is the one that asked the question that motivates you to hear the call?
Well, I think that I've come to realize that the more I've trusted, and God has shown me how, and I've had some success, and I didn't take it on myself. God's been the Mordecai.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit is giving you the right words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been there, and I could trust it. But the one time that was the biggest, of course, was being let go from my job, and within a week, two of the employees that my jobs had been passed on to as they were trying to save money, and 6 other employees called a meeting within 6 days of my being let go, invited me to this house and said, "We will follow you.
Start something new.
Start something new." Me, I'm depressed, I'm old, and I have no idea how to do that.
And no money.
And no money, no money. And well, y'all, the next week, my Mordecai was a Jewish woman in San Antonio, Texas, named Jean Stein, who called and said, "Find property, start a school. I'll pay the salaries for the first 6 months and I'll buy the property."
She said, you helped my boy.
Right. It wasn't building and grounds that hugged my boy. It was you and your staff. And, I looked around, I remember looking around the room while I was on the phone with her, feeling that Esther must have felt when you look behind you and, oh shit, there's nobody else. There's no,
It's
know.
me.
Right.
Just
Well,
me.
she had told, one of these people that had been the primary therapist for her son that she was going to do that. And so, word had gotten out to them.
I didn't know
So
that.
they're with bated breath, are you going to say yes to this money? And I'm 60 years old. Okay, we'll do it. Oh my gosh. I mean, we got a $750,000 piece of property, and she paid all staff salaries for 6 months. And God blessed that whole thing. I had no idea in hell what I'm doing. And when I look at most ventures, I don't know anything about furniture. Just ask Skip. I don't know. God blesses it when I've said yes, except for that one time when I was very positive that I was in control and I messed everything up. But since then, he's proven over and over and
And
over
school
again.
was great.
There's the door, go through the door. Wasn't it a beautiful piece of property?
Gorgeous piece of property.
Did y'all build the school?
Amazing.
It had a house. We
Oh,
made that.
It had a
you know,
house
the
and a
admin
building,
building.
a metal building, and
Big
that
metal
was the
building.
dormitory and the
Dorm.
kitchen and everything in there. Everything was there.
And Maisie cooked.
I cooked. I love those boys. And I helped.
It was,
Well, that's a good, that's
I
a,
mean, it's been my
Yeah,
experience. And-
And where
and I-
was it?
In South Carolina, schools, I
Just
still own
south
part of the
Cashiers.
schools.
That is good.
Right down the road here.
Down
Oh,
107.
really?
in Mountain
Yeah.
Rest.
And it's still going.
And then we
and
started
it's-
from there, we started coming, you know, here to church. And I count it all joy. It has
Amen.
been like a puzzle watching him. And I now feel like I can trust that because I have seen the blowback when I didn't. I lived it. I
Well,
lived
we watched it and it was wonderful,
well,
beautiful.
thanks. But I mean, it's isn't that ironic that a Jewish lady, you
Mm.
know, she started her own Montessori school and then she started her own hospice. And I didn't know hospices made money. How in the world? That seems like a contradiction in terms, but apparently that helped fund us, hospice in San Antonio.
I think that's a beautiful example. I
Mhm.
wonder if any of, I mean, that, she could have written that chapter, called By Circumstance, I think, you know, so, we often don't know. I mean, I think Bishop Little's example was of some Japanese dude who had gone and converted to Christianity because he thought, and because of his culture, thought it was the thing to do when you're in a different, you know, like it was a part of a hospitality,
And
A
died
gesture,
because of it.
and then came back to a different kind of Japan and died as a result of his
Mm.
of that conversion. But he had no idea who that skinny, emaciated guy was or what that would have to do with faith, why anybody would follow him. Why would anybody follow that? Why is that symbol everywhere? And it wasn't until he got back and faced his own death that he began to see this, that God is accompanying us. God is accompanying us. Hopefully it doesn't lead to our death. I don't want that for anyone. But he knew he was not alone.
That's right.
And if at the end of our days, no matter how they come, I hope that for each of us, that we know we are not alone.
Yeah, I think of Dietrich Bonhoeffer,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the same thing, given working in such a dangerous atmosphere and time and place, and giving himself to it, which a lot of people were doing around him at the time of, you know, his
Yeah.
but it ended up taking his life, and it was a total sacrifice. But
The fact that he went back after he was in the United States. wasn't he?
Mhm,
But
he-
then
yeah, and he
went
really
back
loved it,
knowing that.
that he just knew he was called to go back. He had to go. He didn't want to,
Mhm.
you know, it was not a pleasant
No,
situation.
I've realized that for me, the word that I hang on to, that I strongly feel is confidence. But let me clear something up. It ain't self-confidence anymore. That's the difference. That's what it was. That was the teetering place before the fall. Now it's just confidence. He's shown himself time after
Mhm.
time. And the one time it got scary, all of you became a Mordecai for me. And that was when I thought that Macy was really, really sick, only to find out she was faking.
Did a good job.
It was-
Really good.
Yes,
Really good.
But she won the Academy Award for it then.
But,
Oh, I've been found out. Oh,
that's when
I
you-
told you not to tell
when
everybody.
you all pulled me through and I had to just trust that you could do it and put my head on your shoulder and sob.
Well, in Maisie's defense, I don't think she faked that thing bulge. that passed out her.
Just thought I was getting fat.
I didn't mean to take so much
No,
time,
it's
but
fine.
it's just.
Oh, that
Good
was
point.
good. It was
So
a
real.
good story.
Well,
good
can you
example.
tell in a quick way, because I know you didn't plan this, but to tell the Dory story, because I've heard it referred to twice and I miss being
Oh,
here.
you know what? Todd and I rewatched Finding Nemo last night because I was like, I use this analogy and I'm not going to get to preach on it. Let's watch the movie.
Oh,
So in the movie Finding Nemo, right, there's the little fish that gets
Yeah.
lost and his daddy goes to look for him.
Yeah.
And he's assisted into looking for this little tiny fish by a fish with 100 disabilities. The biggest one being she has no short-term memory. So she
And
frequently
here interrupt.
and she frequently forgets what they're doing or who he is or what that fish's name
So
is. She calls him everything from Bruno to, anyway, I forgot all that part, but
Oh,
but
that's
she
funny.
can remember, and there's a sequel called Finding Dory, which we also watched. So which I never had seen,
Uh.
but the
Oh.
she says, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. When she knows
Oh,
that she can't remember something, or she doesn't know what's happening, or she's very overwhelmed by what's going on around her,
Oh,
she
I
says
identify.
this song, just keep swimming. Well, you find out when you watch the sequel that that's the song her parents taught her. If there's a theological reflection in this, it's that somehow
Yes.
she was able to internalize something that those folks who had created her had given her as this sort of internal compass, meaning if you keep
Just keep
swimming, because if you stop swimming, nothing's going to happen. But if you keep swimming, I think when we hear from Jesus or when the intent of the Gospels and the readings from the Sunday is that you may lose your life, but God holds your soul. And so I think that's what Jesus was trying to say to those people who followed him. Things are going to happen, terrible things are going to happen, but I've got this. And this keep swimming image just kept coming to me as in just keep praying. You could say it like that. Just keep praying, just keep praying, just keep praying. But you could,
Mhm.
or, just keep being in relationship or
Did she at times
Keep going.
decide it was too hard and stop
but then,
swimming?
of course, and then other,
And then she probably went down. She probably,
I don't know.
a
I
fish
think
has to
mostly it's
swim.
just, it's a feeling of feeling lost.
Yeah.
That she became overwhelmed by that. But then in the movie and in the story, there's always a companion. There's someone who steps in. There's a way. So for her,
Gives you a nudge.
yes, for her, because she doesn't remember or know that feeling of fear in some ways, she makes crazy decisions about how to get out of a circumstance, how to survive a shark attack, how to get out of a whale, how to get across a street. I mean, whatever it is, she figured, but because because keep swimming is her motto, that means keep moving, keep doing the next thing. And so she's not overwhelmed by the feeling like, I have no idea what to do here.
Right.
And she doesn't have that thing that we are often haunted by. I don't want to put too much stead in this movie, but what are we often haunted by when we make a decision? We're haunted by what happened when we failed, what happened when we were sad, what happened when things went terribly wrong. Those are the things that we fixate on, most of us. Maybe, I mean, there are people who don't. I know that.
Do to cause us, you mean? I
Yeah,
mean,
or
kind of
that
thing.
kind of thing, or like, what was I thinking?
Uh-huh.
I know I have terrible short-term memory. I know I can't remember things. I mean, she could remember that from time to time, and that this upset people, but it wasn't enough to keep her from doing the next thing that needed to be done. But for
Doesn't
us,
the fish,
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to
Yes.
take this analogy, but doesn't the fish have to swim for the oxygen to go through its gills? And
And
mean,
sharks.
is
do.
it shark? I
think it's
know
sharks.
sharks have to.
they don't.
yeah.
It's never that clear in the
Okay.
in the
Yeah.
thing. It's just her.
But that is true.
I
That's
think
just
it's what
sharks.
her inner compass is. That, like,
Yeah.
if motto is the Lord is my shepherd, or have mercy on me, Jesus, a sinner, or count it all joy, right? Whatever, or maybe it's not even words, it's more of a feeling or silence or anything
Mhm.
else, to hold on to that
Mhm.
thing in the midst of what everybody else is saying, we can't do this. This can't happen. Even if that's, okay, maybe even if that's bifurcated in yourself. If that's, again, the pros and cons that are just who we are, right? Where I can't do that. I've never done it before. I'm not a good public speaker. I'm terrible at this. I can't do that.
You just do the
I don't
next
have
right
any,
thing.
I don't have any, no
Take one
fish can jump across the highway, whatever it is, and silly things like that. But we do that. Here's the reasons this doesn't work.
Mhm,
I'm too old.
mhm.
I don't have
I
any
know
money.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I've
I'm
never
depressed.
started a school. I'm depressed. I'm not available. I'm not able. I'm
It's just totally out of
right.
reach.
And then the
No.
other thing is you do it. You keep swimming. So that was the analogy that
Okay,
I thought
yeah.
was just so
Yeah, yeah.
that again given to me by the Holy Spirit, not
Well,
yeah,
that
not because I
works.
hardly ever can remember, things like that. So
Well, it makes me think about in the recent past, I've had a number of sort of crises,
mhm,
uh, starting out with children and grandchildren,
Mhm.
and it occupied my mind all the time, and worrying, and then struggling to not worry and trust God has this, and even spoke to me, in that way one time in centering prayer, I've got this, and yet at some point fairly recently, I decided, where is he? He hasn't done anything. It's not getting better. I've been praying. Everybody I know's been praying. Um, and and I got angry. And I said, what do you want? What else can I do? I've been trying to trust you and leave it with you and know that you've got this, and you aren't doing anything, and it's getting worse. And then my hip goes out and I get COVID, and one thing after. But my tolerance is short. I mean, it doesn't matter how long it takes. I still know he's got this, and he can work. I know from my past experience, he can work miracles out of nothing. And
Look at you.
and yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that he shows himself faithful. And so why do I have to get so, I mean, I really had gotten to where I just gave up on it.
Because he wasn't working fast enough to suit you.
I gave up on it. But he's been beginning to reel me back in, and I'm glad.
Thank you. That's hard to
Mhm.
That's hard to articulate sometimes because it takes us a long time just to even see that. And there's not a lot of space for you to have that conversation. Like, I'm mad about
Mhm.
that. I'm frustrated with
I
that.
really did
Yeah.
feel angry. Aren't you just asking us to pray faithfully, to pray constantly? Well, I have to admit that mixed in with all my prayer was a lot of worry. And he doesn't want me to do that. He wants me to pray and have faith. But my faith, it doesn't depend on my faith either.
That's right.
He's faithful without me. And so,
Wow.
It's unfolding.
and what a wonderful thing
wait.
it'll be when
Maybe.
it's all fixed.
Well,
When we all get to heaven.
You know what I always say is part of my prayer oftentimes is, God, you know me, you made me, you know where I am
Yes.
right
Mhm,
now.
mhm,
You know,
mhm,
take me where I am and
mhm.
help me.
And take me where you want me to be.
Yes, exactly.
And I think about Moses, who said, I mean, he just constantly faced this thing, which was, we want cucumbers, we want water,
Mhm,
we want
mhm.
bread, we want to go back to Egypt, we don't
You
like
brought
it.
us out here to starve to
We-
death.
we want an idol we can worship. We
Mm.
want this. And then then Moses didn't even get to go.
Mhm.
They were
see-
trying
No, he did not get to go. He just stood on the
Yeah.
thing and watched, or stood over and looked at it and said, well, there it is.
Can you imagine what
But-
I would, I
That's what I
would be
mean.
standing there fuming and
Right.
shake.
Are you
and
kidding?
This isn't fair.
I took
Look
all
what
of
I've
this.
done.
So I think about that sometimes
Well, you-
when we do feel like we've done the work and
Well, when you
interceded.
go to think about Job, and I always picture
Yeah.
Job walking and saying to God, you wanted to see me? I mean, it's like enough already. I mean, okay. So, and I think that my problem comes when people really have the trust that something is going to get better through prayer. And I know that a lot of stuff does, but then there's the stuff that doesn't. And I don't understand the pick and the choose.
No.
I mean, that's where I get kind of shaky about it, because I'm thinking, well, that one turned out okay, but why is this happening? And why did these people's prayer not get answered?
Yes.
And so can you
'Cause it's
fix
not-
that?
so- Right, we know it's not the quality of the prayer. Okay.
'Cause,
Although-
okay, yeah, yes. I
Yeah,
don't think
know
it's
you-
the
I know
quality
you
of the
know
prayer,
that.
but
And
I don't understand,
And I don't think it's manipulative, right? I think human beings are manipulative. I don't think God is manipulative.
No.
I think that perhaps what our response is to other people's prayers not being answered is where the Holy Spirit is. Like that's we have to change the question in some ways to sort of say, then where is God in this?
And
And
that,
if that is in me, and how do I change in response to seeing someone's prayer not answered? If that's how we're interpreting that, right? Like, so much of this is in the place of the hearer, in the place of the one who sees. And so what is our response to that? Like, because we have the agency. I think, Kate, you know this, and I'm going to use, your example at Blue Ridge is the best one I can think of, is seeing what's happening to the children at Blue Ridge and then trying to organize, do something yourself, organize others. That is what that call, that's what happened to you in the midst of someone else's prayers, because that's assuming that everyone, that the children at Blue Ridge who are in need, great need, some of them, that somehow God isn't hearing their parents' prayers, or God isn't answering the prayers of those who need it, or the prayers that we make on their behalf, right? Maybe God did answer their prayer because you got involved. You took care. Does that make some sense? It doesn't change
Yes,
that
ma'am.
outcome, but I think sometimes in our own narcissistic, because that's who we are and that's how we survive. And, we can go back and study some Freud and talk about what ego does and how it functions for us. But what God says is, I am who I am, not who you are. And that's hard for us. And so when we see everything through that filter, the ego filter, because the ego is right next to primary understanding of how we came to be in this space. So that's what makes it complicated. I think that's where it gets real messy in there for us. And I don't have any answers. That is like a very uninformed response to that, Kate. I think we all, I'm going to say maybe we all struggle from that, right? We all struggle from, well, I'm so glad that Maisie was healed. However, why isn't some of the other people who are on the ward with her, why weren't they healed? Right?
I just keep hearing this. I think it's so that if we give enough time, if we go far enough out, we reach the point most of the time of saying, thank God for unanswered prayers, because we can see what he's done that's different from what we were asking for, that if we have enough distance between us and the crisis and we see how it has worked out, that God was in charge and it was a better solution, even if it meant that somebody didn't live, or whatever, that a lot of those answers are beyond our understanding. But a lot of times we can say, oh, thank God, he worked it out this way. I was just praying with a clenched fist about it being this way.
So he did answer.
He did answer. He didn't answer my prayer the way I prayed it, because I was asking for something different.
Well,
but
this is that
he
thing,
answered
yes,
it.
when two football coaches pray
Yeah,
before
Yeah.
a game.
yeah. Where somebody's
I-
having a wedding and they pray for it not to rain, and this farmer over here's field is drying
right.
up.
That's right. So, those are those understandings of prayer that are way beyond
yeah.
me. I remember, you all know about my son, and and he's a recovering addict, and so many of his friends, so many of the people that he knows have died
Mhm.
as a result of either opioids or fentanyl or something, right? And every one of those has a potential in him for causing a relapse
Mm.
or having him remain true to his recovery community,
Mhm.
even though the sense of loss is so amazing. Now, how do I pray about that? How do I pray about those mamas and daddies whose son is not in not in recovery? That has been one of those places for me, Kate, that has made no sense about that at all. So I don't know, and I would like it all to work out. And I think that's the reason I believe in heaven, partially. And I'm glad that because God works that out someplace else.
Mhm.
That pain, that suffering,
Ugh.
that thing that
The unanswered.
yes, that somehow, and maybe that's Pollyanna. I get that, or naive, but or ill-informed. But it's the way I kind of function, to sort of say, my prayer is that I hope this is not the end, that this is a new beginning. So, right.
Thank you.
Doesn't mean it's okay to let it go. Doesn't mean I don't want you to I want you to fight for opioid reduction stuff and, better care for people and all that. I do, just like you want to fight for making sure kids have the right school supplies and the right kind of attention to the needs they have. That's important that we do our part on this side. It's still important. I mean, Esther could have said, well, it's going to be all right. I don't know whether Esther believed in resurrection, but she didn't say that. She said, okay, I want everybody. Don't you love what she did? She said, let's pray and fast
Yeah.
for 3
Mhm.
days.
Mhm.
She didn't just rush right into the king's chamber and start swearing at him and asking him what the hell he was doing. They said, let's pray.
Mhm.
Not only me, but how about this whole community?
Praying
And
fast.
what would that do? How does that not change God's mind, but how did that impact just how everybody was going to go forward?
When you're in one of those places when it's so much bigger than you, and you can't do anything to make it work, and you pray and you ask God to fix it. My experience recently with being healed of an addiction.
Yeah.
I realized at one point in that 2-day process that I went through, from the prayers to the answer, that I had to take a step, just a little step. I had to, that by saying, I'm willing. And I just went by that Dollar General and didn't stop and buy back. That was my little step. And after that, God just did the rest. And so sometimes I think that's,
So maybe when we're
Found
faced
it
with
all
something,
short.
kind of all
Good
right. Sometimes when we face that, maybe what our takeaway is for me, I mean, I'm thinking, oh, there's space. So sometimes there's not space. If there's a kid crossing the street and a truck is coming, there's not space. I don't want anyone fasting and praying about what's going to happen. Please don't. But yeah,
most, for the
my-
next 2 seconds, I'm passing.
Maybe I can give thanks later. But I think most things in our lives are things where we could take the time, the space between what we've just realized, something we didn't know. Remember, she had no idea. Why was Mordecai walking around in sackcloth? What is happening? Why would anybody do that? Why would this be a thing? So between the time of hearing that news and trying to put that all into like this new model, which is my husband is fixing to kill all my kin, and then putting it into a new model. So how does she do that? And I might have something to do about it. She had to take the time to say, really, am I the person? I'm guessing in those 3 days you'd be saying, as I fast and rely on God, because it doesn't say that in the text again, but what is fasting and prayer about?
Mhm.
And she asked them to do it as well.
As
right?
well, like a
Right.
community.
From this very weak place that she could
Yeah.
see that Mordecai
Right? Yeah. Right. So it wasn't a singular action. She invited the community into it. She also took along her maids, those in her, what she would, it could term her household.
Mhm.
She didn't tell the whole court they were going to fast and pray, but her household, they did fast and pray. So what an amazing, and I guess we could go into the numerology of that, you know, the threeness of it.
Hmm.
What a lovely, lovely thought. So it's encouraging for me to remember that, oh yeah, maybe the decision requires some time. Sometimes it doesn't need, again, it's a child in the middle of the street. We're not taking time. We're going to be acting, but you know, again, God giving us maybe the call that we need in the way we need to hear it. So that might be a consideration for all of us. Am I receiving this call in some way that, if I know myself well enough, you know, I mean, Esther had a particular way that she could interface here. All of the examples that Bishop Little has used had a particular way that they were part of their communities or that were sent outside of their communities, but it makes sense. Sometimes we just know the stories in part, like Moses. We know the basket story. We know the bush story. We know we know the Passover story, but sometimes we don't put it all together. Like, how did those things fit together? We know the Joseph story of the pit and the coat and the pit and the wheat, but do we know?
The brothers.
Right. Do we know the whole way it fits together in a way that means that God's call to them would have been unique and aimed it right at their heart because of their going to this chapter called by circumstance. The story fits together. I know we're reading it backward. I know we are. You know, we can make the story turn out any way we want. I know that.
But that's
And-
true, and it allows them to
Yeah.
look at it from after it's over and make sense of it
Right.
as we
Yeah.
put the pieces together and say, wow, look what he did.
And does it, if it's not, I don't know, is it inspirational? I hope so. And if, as Sharon says, count it all joy, then that's what we're doing. Right? Because we do see a through line. And maybe that's not as accurate, like historically, but it is accurate theologically. That through line is accurate for us. And so without Esther, who knows? And that any of us might have that same call. Maybe not on that scale, for sure, but every day. Okay, we have wasted another hour and 15 minutes together.
No, we have not. I miss this.
Are you
Okay.
kidding?
So next
So
week,
We have one more.
next week, we will gather, we will talk about the book in total. We will talk about how it's impacted us, and I really would like it to be less Allison centered and more you centered, but I'm happy to fill the space. Oh, you guys did a great job today. No doubt about it. The book that we're gonna do in Advent is on angels and hearing the voice of God through the words of the angels. So it's shorter. Of course, it's just a 4-week study, but it talks about the angels' interactions with Mary with Joseph, with Zechariah, and with the shepherds.
Are you
So,
talking about Sunday school or
no,
Thursday?
Thursdays.
Oh,
Is that,
good.
do we have them here?
And the books are here now. You can pick them up.
Good.
I don't know how much they are.
$15.
Thank you at Ginger. They're $15.
Alrighty.
And it's a very interesting, it's different. It's not this book, obviously, and it's different, but I think it gets us ready and prepares us for Advent and the coming of Jesus and how the angels helped us prepare and how they might help us prepare now. So go in
And what
peace
day-
to
what
love
day
you.
does it start?
Thank
Sorry,
you.
what day does, when does
It's gonna-
it start?
The